What's good, wonderful people? I love you all. People of Facebook. It's time for my year-end list that everybody waits for. They put it on their calendar. These are jokes, but I'm doing the top 10 albums of 2018, which is this year. Obviously, great intro so far. So let's not waste your time. So at number 10, I put an album that I wasn't originally going to put on this list, but it deserves to be on this list at number 10 because, well, you know what, I'll just explain here in just a second.
Hold me down in the river and take my breath away.
So Mayday Parade get put at the number 10 spot with Sunnyland, and the reason I put Sunnyland in at number 10 is, okay, two reasons. One, it was music just really wasn't that great. At least the music I heard this year personally wasn't all that great, to be honest with you. I don't really branch out and go into like weird obscure music, but I put Mayday Parade at number 10 because of the turnaround that this album has from their last one. Their last album, Black Lines, was horrible because Derek, the lead singer, I forget his last name, he insisted on like scream yelling, and it was really horrible singing. On Sunnyland, he decided to flip that around. The songwriting is better. The instrumentation on the thing is amazing. Every album on this list, go check out. But Sunnyland is at number 10 because it was a huge turnaround from Black Lines, and this album is actually really, really good. So, interestingly enough, I think there's a couple of these bands on this list. At number 9, it was a band that I actually never heard about until this year came out. The only reason I found out who they were is because I follow very closely their lead singer, Johnny Craig, who's one of my favorite vocalists, and I'm really glad that I found these guys.
You keep your hopes up that I can change. Well, I'll stay honest. It's the same.
So we have Slaves with Beautiful Death at number 9, and okay, I have to admit, the lyrics on this thing are pretty typical, you know, at least for this genre of music. I guess alternative rock is what I would put it in. But the lyrics are pretty typical, like, how could you hurt me? How could you leave me? And then, you know, somewhere down the line, he's like, oh, I need to change for you. Pretty typical stuff like that. You've heard these lyrics 1,000 times, but what sets this album apart from those other ones is literally the instrumentation is phenomenal. For a rock album, it is awesome. I never get bored. Every single song has such great instrumentation on it. I never get bored. And Johnny Craig's vocals are amazing as always. So at number 8, I actually expected this album to be on my list when it came out. It came out, I think, in February or March, pretty early this year. I knew it was going to make my list, there's a fuzzy. I knew it was going to make my list because this artist is extremely underrated, and I'll tell you why in just a second.
Never think I'll ever be used to your body, used to your body, cruising your body. I'll never think I'll ever be used to your body.
AWOL Nation, Here Come the Runts. I've talked about instrumentation for the last 2 albums, but I want to talk about AWOL Nation's ability. Aaron Bruno, the lead singer, he's basically the front man and the only man in AWOL Nation. His ability to take instruments and do what he does with them, if that makes any sense, is really impressive. I just can't understand. The composition of all these songs is so unique. This album is so catchy. It's probably his catchiest album, to be honest. More so than their Megalithic Symphony, and more so than Run. The lyrics can get kind of redundant. He repeats himself a lot on this album. But if you actually look into the lyrical content of what Aaron Bruno is saying, the lyrics are actually pretty deep. He is kind of a, kind of cryptic in his message. But if you dive into it, actually pretty cool. So at number 7, we have an album from an artist. I love the artist, I will say that. But I did not really like this album when it first came out. To be honest, I think I was persuaded by other music critics' critique of the album, and I was like, you know what, other people don't really like this, so I can't really like this album, can I? After listening to it, I think it was like last week. I listened to it last week all the way through, like twice. This album deserves a spot. I love this album. I didn't think I did, but I do.
Dancing's not a crime, unless you do it without me.
This album is just too much fun to not have on this list. I'm serious. Like, it's such a fun album, and sometimes that's what you need, okay? The lyrics are well written for what it needs to be. I had a lot of fun with this album. You know, you can get up and dance with this one. I don't dance, I sing, but you can dance if that's what you want to do. There are some songs on here, like Dying in LA specifically, and I'm trying to think of the other songs coming to mind. High Hopes. Both of those songs, High Hopes and Dying in LA, have some really good lyrical content in there. Aside from that, you get just kind of, you know, fun, poppy stuff. Dancing's Not a Crime, the song you just heard, is my favorite song off of the album. Hands down, super, super good album. Just, it's fun. If you're looking for a fun album, you know, it's just nice to kind of tune out critique and just get some fun music on. Number 6 is a very interesting choice because this was another artist who I'm not really I'm more of a casual fan of this rock group. And I didn't really think I was going to check out their album as much as I did, but the more and more I listen to it, the more and more I love it. I'll be the first to admit, Muse are not lyrical geniuses. I have to admit, some of their lyrics kind of bother me. Their last album, especially Drones, I believe is what it was. I liked the instrumentation, but on Drones, the lyrics, I don't know. I didn't like them. I'm not saying that on Simulation Theory here, that the lyrics are 1,000 times better, but they are better. They're kind of going for this 80s, like, rock synthesizer pop rock. I don't even know how to describe it really, but it's very Muse, and I think they do it really, really well. Matthew Bellamy on every album is an amazing vocalist. Look, whether I dislike or like the Muse album that I'm listening to, Matthew Bellamy's vocals, he's one of the best rock vocalists I've ever heard. Kind of like Panic at the Disco, this album's kind of fun, but it has a little bit more lyrical meaning behind it, if not written very well. But hey, what can I say? I like this album. I'm still listening to it. So I'm completely aware that my editing is all over the place. I've never considered myself a professional editor, but you know, it is what it is. At number 5, we have another artist who I had heard about but never listened to anything by them. But they started releasing these singles, and I think it was 3 singles in. I was like, I've got to check out who this band is, and I'm glad I did. Blue October with I Hope You're Happy. This lands on my number 5 spot, mostly for lyrical content. Don't get me wrong, everything else about this album is really good. I don't know who the lead singer is, but he's got a really interesting voice is what I'll say. And I actually looked up a video the other day of him singing live, and he didn't look anything like I thought he would. Regardless, I like the way that the Blue October attacked the topic of a breakup. Now I know what you're saying, how many albums do we have to hear about breakups and moving on? But to be honest, I think the Blue October got it right. I think they expressed like real feelings that you actually feel when you're going through a relationship. Throughout this album, you have songs where he's singing about how he just can't stand the other person and you just hate seeing that person with somebody else. And then in other parts of the album, you kind of have the Blue October taking a step back and saying, okay, maybe the problem is actually me and not that other person. And it does this like flip-flop of narration that I actually really, really enjoyed. Some of these songs could really hit home for you if you, don't listen to sad music if you're going through a breakup. I think that's dumb because I did it and it was dumb. But honestly, I feel like this album was pretty genuine with some really well-written songs, and we're throwing it at number 5. At number 4, we have a band that I highly respect for keeping their sound but staying different enough to stay relevant. Honestly, I have to give them a lot of credit for keeping that sound but keeping me coming back over and over again. Breaking Benjamin with Ember. Honestly, I have liked every Breaking Benjamin album that has come out to some extent. To be honest, this I said it before I played the music, you know, the fancy editing that's not really fancy. But I really respect these guys for keeping true to their sound without changing it up too much. I have to admit that they do sound the same, but there's enough difference in their music that keeps me coming back. The lyrics on this thing, very Breaking Benjamin. The instrumentation on this thing, very Breaking Benjamin. And to be honest, I am still going back to this album. Like, I actually go out of my way to listen to a lot of the songs on this album because it is a good rock album. Breaking Benjamin come through. Benjamin Burnley. Vocals are great. His growls and screams on this thing are really good. My wife will beg to differ on that. But if you guys are looking for a rock album to listen to this year, I would say, okay, either Ember by Breaking Benjamin, or you could also check out Eat the Elephant by A Perfect Circle. The top 3 are very exciting. Number 3 is a band that kind of came out of left field with me because I had heard singles from them, and I liked the singles, but I never went out of my way to listen to anything by them. I didn't really care. But then they released a handful of singles from this upcoming album, and I literally loved every single one. The 1975 with a brief inquiry into online relationships. I'm going to be honest with you right now. The only reason that this isn't number 1 is because of the stupid interludes where nothing is happening. They have like 3 interludes on here that are like 5 minutes long, and it drives me insane when bands just throw random stuff into their album to break up the songs. I can't stand those interludes. Aside from those interludes though, this is a near perfect album. The album title alone should just tell you what it's about. There are no secrets here. This album explores online relationships. It explores social issues. It explores some political issues. Normally, I'm not a fan of political or social issues, but they attacked the subjects in a pretty cool manner, I guess I should say. There are so many different elements of music in this, like jazz and pop and rock. I really like how they explored using the horns section, and they used the guitars pretty perfectly. I really just wish they would have taken those stupid interludes out. I just can't. Instrumental music is fine, but it's got to be interesting enough to keep my attention for 5 minutes. Aside from the interludes, this album is... I loved it, and from my understanding, so did a lot of other people. At number 2 is an artist who I love vocally. Everything he does is vocal magic. I can only strive to have a voice like this guy.
Stay, little Valentine. I stay.
Michael Bublé with Love. So much credit goes to Michael Bublé for this album. It came after his son was diagnosed with cancer. His son, thankfully, is okay now. Even with that entire background, I think Michael Bublé could have milked this album, and it could have been 10 to 12 songs about how Michael Bublé is just asking us to, send us his prayers, and oh, it's so sad that my son has cancer. There's not one song on this album like that. This is a Michael Bublé album through and through. The other thing that I love about this album is there are no, pop songs. Michael Bublé is very capable of making a hit pop song. You all know that. On this album, he didn't make, in my opinion, a song that could have went straight to radio. There is a song on this album about his son, but even when it's about his son, you would have to know the background of his son having cancer at all to know it was even about him. This album gave me chills from start to finish. I mean, it's incredible. Michael Bublé's vocals, always incredible. The instrumentation, the dramatic buildup of the strings and the horns is just amazing. And had it not been for this next album, it would have landed at number 1. So let's talk about number 1 for a second, shall we? When this album came out, I was going to buy the physical copy. I knew that. I was going to get it the day of release. I was going to pop it into my CD player, which I still have in my car, and I was going to turn the volume up to 55. That's loud for my car. And I was going to drown everything out so I could take it all in. I'll be honest, first time I heard this album, I liked it. Didn't love it. I was a little disappointed, not a lot disappointed. I was just like, ugh, I expected this to be way, way better. As soon as I got rid of that mentality of this album was just going to be the best thing in the world, interestingly enough, it became the best thing in the world.
I'ma get mine and get going. I'm showing my faces in decent places. I'm going to going. I'll stay in my room. My house is the one where the vultures are perched on the roof. Get behind me, I'll bet this capitalistic mindset will help us get ours as we're growing. This could mean
21 Pilots with Trench. What can I even say about this album? I guess first I want to say something that my brother-in-law were talking about maybe a couple weeks ago, and we've talked about it once in a while since then, and that's lore. But there's so much backstory to this album that it is confusing. Literally, it's confusing. 21 Pilots have built this album up for over a year, and I think that's really cool to give the fans something to just study and examine and learn about going into an album. From my understanding, they're in this album talking about this man named Nico who has built his own city. He runs the city, he owns the city, and everything about the city is perfect. As he goes through the album, though, Nico starts to realize that, you know, this isn't great. I think I need to get out of here and go down my own road. Now, that might not sound very cool the way I explain it, but you just need to go read it. Go read about this album because every song on here has such an incredible meaning, is delivered perfectly. 21 Pilots have absolutely matured. Don't get me wrong, Vessel is still my favorite album from them, but I can absolutely appreciate how much they have grown. I didn't even know it was possible, but Tyler Joseph, better lyrically on this album. Tyler Joseph is an absolutely incredible lyricist. I cannot recommend this album enough. I mean, for only having two people in the band, they absolutely destroyed this album in the best way. Honestly, there are parts of this album where Tyler Joseph's flow is so good, I thought my CD player was going to burst into flames. Side note, the production on this thing, I'm not a big stickler on production. By not being a big stickler on production, I mean I can't really hear the difference because I'm not like that, I guess. But this album is so clear and so amazing. Just check it out if you haven't. I'm assuming you've all heard this to some capacity, so just listen to it if you haven't. I don't want to talk your ears off forever. Just know those are the 10 best albums of the year, and I'm not going to make a video for it, but the worst album of the year is America by 30 Seconds to Mars. What a heaping pile of garbage. Have a wonderful day.